arguments saying that Christianity is false, or just religion in general is false. I'm talking to anyone here.
Sure. I mean, I just don't believe in magic, so I don't believe in Christianity for basically the exact same reasons that a Christian would think all other religions in the world are false. They think all the stories are just completely too stupid to believe are true. Or to the extent that some Christians will say, well, I like Muhammad could have done the miracles that he did or whatever, but there just isn't enough historical backing, and we really have the historical evidence for our claim. I don't believe that either. I also think the Christian God is just a contradiction and can't exist.
Okay, so about that second thing, the Christian God is a contradiction. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Sure, we're told that he's all knowing and all powerful, and that he's all good, but he repeatedly doesn't know things, forgets things, changes his mind, lies, and commits horrendous acts of genocide and murder.
Okay, cool. So I think the basis of a lot of whenever people say, "Oh, look at all these awful things they've done," I think the argument in general, forgive me if I'm wrong about this, is that God cannot be all powerful, all knowing, and evil exists. Is that correct?
Well, he can't be all good,
Or
and
all
let
good, all knowing.
evil exist, even if he is all powerful, if he chooses to do nothing about it. But like, I'm not like, when people use the problem of evil and they say, why doesn't God stop kids having cancer or whatever? I don't think that that's even a strong argument. God himself kills kids. So it's not like God is just letting the bad things happen. Because the argument always goes, well, then we wouldn't have free will. So God gives us our free will, and we choose to act in accordingly or whatever. That's fine. But God does unthinkably stupid things like create a covenant with Israel demanding they chop off the tip of the wee of all their kids, which would have killed untold numbers of kids from infections, because it still happens today, and it would have been way worse in the past. And why was that? Why chop off the tip of your wee and give kids infections and die for no reason? To appease what is effectively a monster in that case.
Okay, cool. So I think maybe not discussing the circumcision thing, but just in general, the argument that if the evil exists and God is all good and all powerful, then evil wouldn't exist. I think that is generally from a very like earth-centric mindset, in that evil, in the sense of what happens on earth, is the ultimate sort of end of whatever can be. And so in Leviticus in the Bible, it says, all is dust. Everything is eventually going, like everything on earth is ultimately meaningless, in the sense that heaven and hell are just so alien concepts to what can happen on earth, that all the suffering on earth and all of the pain and all of the joy on earth cannot really be comprehended, or cannot stand in light of heaven or hell. And so you can look at all these bad things and say, this is awful. And I agree, it is bad, it is awful, but ultimately it pales in comparison to what good can come. And so it's like in a mathematical sense, right? Any number divided by infinity becomes zero. And so if you look at any suffering that happens on earth, ultimately it doesn't matter in it.
Then there's no such thing as right or wrong. God has permission to do whatever God wants, and people that call themselves to the faith have permission to carry out whatever kind of monstrous act they want, because it doesn't matter, because of the infinities of the afterlife. Which is not an argument that the worldview is false, but it's an argument for the swift eradication of that type of worldview.
Not necessarily. I think people have done awful things in the name of Christianity. I don't think that's good at all. I think the Crusades were bad. I think genocide in the name of God is bad. But to say that because a child dies of cancer, that child can't go to heaven and experience an afterlife where that cancer is just a pale thought. I think that's where you have the argument.
Okay,
And so,
maybe I misunderstood a little bit the point you were making, but I also like I was pretty explicit that I don't even find the arguments of why does God passively allow evil to happen really the best arguments centered around the idea of the problem of evil. It's the fact that God is the instrument of it that is far more convincing and damning, I think.
okay, cool. And so, just from what you're talking about, could you give me like just one example we could look at of that?
Yeah, creating a covenant for absolutely no reason with the Israelites and having them circumcise their kids, which would have certainly caused children to die pointlessly of infections that needed to happen for absolutely no reason.
So, I think the idea of circumcision it's a expression of spiritual purity or of like spiritual like a way to set yourself off from the rest of the uncircumcised masses, right? It's
But
and
God
so
knows who has faith in him and who doesn't. You don't need to chop off your wee wee. God doesn't
but I think
need you to put the patch on your sleeve like they did in Nazi Germany to be like, oh, you're one of those or you're not one of those.
I think though it's using that same logic, like why would Christians wear crosses, or it's a
That's
symbol of
something
their
Christians choose to do. They're not called to do it.
um I see. So yeah, and so you say that kids die of infection or of these
That wouldn't have happened otherwise except God told them to do it. God knows, well, if I tell them to do this, they're going to get infections and die. And so I'm going to tell them to do it. It's just like horrendous.
cool. I'm not aware of many, like I think it'd be possible to circumcise people without having infections. I think I mean
Hundreds of kids die every year today from it.
today.
Back then it would have been so much higher.
Um, hmm. Okay, so I'll look into that. That's interesting.
Hmm.
Okay then. So circumcision is one thing you don't like about God. And then
And as
also
many
just
genocides, yeah.
and genocides. And so example of genocides then.
Oh, there are so many to choose from. I'm going to pick one that's slightly different. I wouldn't call this by definition a genocide, but I would pre-frame it with the question of, does it make any moral logical sense to you to punish somebody for a crime they didn't even commit?
I think generally no, that wouldn't be a good thing. Yeah.
Okay. What crime did the firstborn in Egypt commit?
So again, you know, the firstborn in Egypt, I think they were it's you look at that and you think, okay, this is so horrible. But then the belief in the Bible, there's the idea of the age of innocence, right? And the if you die before you can know God, then you won't be sent to hell. And I think, if anything, whenever you see all these people die, it's they would have been raised in a sort of this society that would have them believe in this pantheon of Egyptian gods. And so the children, I think maybe this is where our ideas conflict, because you see this suffering as this horrific thing, whereas I see it as a temporary step that in the grand scheme of things really doesn't matter in, you know,
My
it
my
because
oldest sister is in her 50s, and in a society as large as Egypt, wherever this was at the time, there would have been examples like that as well.
of of people who
Of people's firstborn children being in there. It's a very weird thing as well, because it's like technically, like my oldest sister, yet she's in her 50s, but she also has a kid. So do people who have children not count because because I mean, that would just, I don't know what the numbers would actually work out to be, but you'd be killing like 20% of the entire population if it was just all the firstborn. So is it just people who haven't had kids yet? Well, again, that could, like, plenty of people don't have kids. So, like, you could literally be like Bill Maher doesn't have any kids, and I don't know if he's an only child or the oldest child, but the dude's like in his 60s, and so according to what it says, he would be killed. Now, are we supposed to understand it as, well, no, it's only if they're like under the age of whatever, 13 or something like that? Who knows? The reason I'm about to win this debate you're going to watch is because I literally wrote the book on how to do that. Rational Answers to Stupid Questions tackles about 100 of the most common anti-scientific tropes we hear all the time. If you want to be well equipped to tackle stupidity and also learn the history and research behind the facts, you can get a copy by going to the link below. Thank you. But you're kind of, I just think you're reading into it stuff that isn't there. This age of accountability.
What do you mean reading into stuff that isn't there?
It doesn't say that only children. It says all the firstborn in Egypt. It doesn't say all of the children who were born first and did not yet know God.
No, I think no. It just all the firstborn. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that there is an age of innocence, and so you wouldn't see innocent people dying and going to hell. But also, if you look at ancient Egypt as a slave-owning civilization, and it was done to release the Israelites. I mean,
killing kids is not fair game for letting my people go. I don't think anybody thinks that. And like, we also kind of have to go back a little bit to what you're saying. Even if they went to heaven, that makes it okay to kill them. You can't possibly be against abortion if that's the case.
Abortion, I think, it's not good. I think that's a different issue.
But why?
And I think that in our society, abortion, it should exist, though, to prevent the issues that would come about, at least in America, without abortion. But I think that's a different issue. I don't think killing of kids is good, but I think if you look at that as
then the Passover was not good.
If you look at that, it's ultimately doesn't matter, though. That's kind of my argument here, because these kids who died, you look at the suffering here, but it doesn't matter in comparison to the end goal of heaven.
Again, then anything is permissible.
Yeah, you could say that, but I don't think just because something could be permissible, it should be done.
But can I step in and ask one question? I just want to know if BLN, are you an annihilationist?
No, I'm not familiar with that, but I don't think I am.
Okay, so you believe that people in the lake of fire are consciously, eternally tormented?
Consciously, eternally tormented. I don't think it's really my place to say what definitively happens after you die, and those are some questions I've grappled with as a Christian as well. But I think people who go to hell don't deserve, or it's not like they don't deserve to be there. I think if you're going to be punished for eternity, then there's going to be a reason you're punished for eternity.
Okay, I have 2 points and then I'll step out. One is that you appealed to eschatology to get out of the problem of evil, but now you just stated that you're not even sure what happens in the eschaton. So it's strange to appeal to something where you're unsure of it. The second point is, if they are consciously, eternally tormented, presumably that's like the worst thing and is unimaginable. And on most accounts of Christianity, that's like the majority of people are consciously, eternally tormented forever. And so if you take like ultimately everything in totality, God would be like this ultimate demiurge torturing the majority of humans for eternity. Does that sound strange to you?
That sounds strange, torturing humans for eternity. I believe, so you're saying infinite punishment for finite crime, that's what's strange?
I'm saying it's strange for a all-powerful, all-knowing, all-good God to torture the majority of humanity unimaginably for eternity. That's not something I would expect.
Yeah. I'd love to say I definitively know what happens after you die, but I don't, frankly. And I think It's certainly a question I've grappled with. I know a lot of people who I like and aren't, you know, by bad people, and they're not Christians either. And I think the torture for eternity, though, and I can't say definitively if someone's going to go to heaven or hell, right? But specifically, if you look at Genesis and angels and Lucifer, the reason that he is sent to hell for all of eternity is because whenever you defy God or whenever you make a decision against God, that's an eternal act. That's something that's you can't reverse that decision. And so, at least in that context, yes. And again, I'm not sure. I couldn't tell you because, honestly, frankly, it's not my place to tell you that if people are going to go and suffer for all eternity, what people specifically. But I think God is merciful, and that people sent there wouldn't be sent there if they didn't belong there.
I think I'm not gonna like accuse you of anything because you're saying like I'm not sure, but I don't think your logic works. I think you're trying to have it both ways because for the reason you said that the bad things that happen here on earth don't matter because of the eternal reward in heaven, it also works, that exact same logic works against you because it doesn't matter what the bad things that happen on earth, none of it justifies an eternity of hell.
So again, though, if you look at the idea of the infinite, right? If God is infinitely good, which I believe that, then by defying him, then you're, in essence, committing an infinitely wrong act. And so I think that could justify the idea.
Do you think that the pre-contacted Native Americans are all in hell?
So again, though, like I'm talking about the age of innocence here, and I'm specifically the age of understanding. It's if you have not had the chance to know God, then I think there is a chance for you to go to heaven. And
so invincible ignorance. Okay, that's.
I don't know.
Well, no, a chance means that if you're doing the calculations, it's an infinite negative, right?
I'm sorry, I don't understand. What do you mean if you're doing calculations?
You're doing like valuations of good and evil. That would, if there's a chance for that, and it's infinite negative, it's still going to be an infinite negative.
I'm sorry, I'm not trying to come off as thick, but just could you please really lay out what you're saying here?
Can anyone clarify that better than what I think? I don't know what I'm saying wrong.
I don't know. I think my argumentation is like decisive. Like obviously you can't appeal to eschatology if you're unsure of it in your theodicy. Like you have to use something else then, unless you're like a skeptical theist, which I presumably you're not. But maybe are you familiar with like theodicies, like generally, like formally, like the way the routes people have used?
Enlighten me.
Okay, so generally it's going to fall into one of two camps. Either you have an explanation and you're aware of it, or you'll say, well, God has an explanation, but we're unaware of it. That would be skeptical theism. And you're saying, well, I don't know what happens, but whatever happens could possibly justify all of this suffering or evil or what have you. If you're saying that justifies God and you're unsure of what it is, then you're a skeptical theist. Skeptical theism is a pretty bad position for a multitude of reasons. One is if God can do bad things for reasons beyond your understanding, it leads to like global skepticism because God could be deceiving you about all of your perceptions for reasons beyond your understanding. And that's one reason why most people don't affirm it. But I don't want to, I'm probably being a bit too technical and sophisticated, and I'll probably step out and let the conversation develop as it was previously.